My name is Raul Morales, and I am writing this because I do not know what else to do with what happened in my house. I have tried not to tell it like a campfire story. I do not want it to sound like that. I am not trying to be dramatic. I am trying to be exact. My son Daniel was 15 when it started. Before that year, he was a normal boy in every way that mattered. He was moody sometimes, lazy about laundry, always hungry, always leaving glasses in his room with an inch of old milk at the bottom. He played soccer until he quit because he said the coach was an idiot. He liked stupid videos, loud music, and sleeping until noon on weekends. He was tall for his age, and still had that awkwardness in his arms and legs, like he had grown too fast, and his body had not caught up with itself. If you had seen him then, you would have noticed his hair first. Black and thick, always falling over his forehead. He had Elena's mouth and my chin. His little sister Sophia adored him, even when he ignored her. I liked to complain about him, but I was proud of him in the way fathers get proud of sons for no reason at all. We were not rich. We were not especially happy or unhappy. We were a family with bills, routines, arguments about dishes, and a calendar on the fridge full of appointments and school events. That is why what happened made us keep trying to fit it into normal life, long after normal life was gone. The first thing we noticed was the smell. Daniel came down for breakfast one morning, and I thought at first that something in the trash had gone bad. It was a sour, heavy smell, like meat forgotten in a hot car. I checked the bin under the sink. I checked behind the stove because sometimes food rolled back there. Sophia said Daniel farted and laughed at her own joke. Daniel just stood by the table in his school shirt, rubbing his neck, not laughing. Then he said, "It's probably me." He said it like a joke too, but he looked embarrassed. I asked when he had last showered. He said the night before. I told him to shower again when he got home and put on deodorant. He rolled his eyes and grabbed toast. When he leaned past me for the butter, the smell got stronger. It was not sweat. It was sweet and rotten at the same time, thick enough that I felt it in the back of my throat. I looked at his neck and saw a patch under his jaw, about the size of a quarter. The skin there was peeling in a circle. It looked raw underneath, pink and damp. "What happened there?" I asked. "Don't know," he said. "Thought it was razor burn. You don't shave there." He shrugged. I told him not to touch it. He touched it anyway. A flap of skin came loose under his fingernail, and he winced. That weekend I made him sit in the bathroom while I looked at it under the light. There were more spots now, one near his hairline, one at the base of his throat. The skin did not look dry the way eczema looks. It looked loose, thin, ready to slide off. When I put ointment on it, he hissed and pulled away. "It burns," he said. It was not burning because of the ointment. I could see that. The whole area was hot, not like a fever, more like there was friction under the skin. We took him to urgent care. The doctor there was a tired woman with a calm voice and purple glasses. She said it might be a fungal infection, maybe impetigo, maybe some strange dermatitis. She prescribed a cream and antibiotics, and told us to keep the areas clean, watch for spreading, come back if he developed a fever. It was a relief to be told words that existed already. For 3 days we followed instructions. Daniel stayed home from school because the smell had gotten worse, and because one of the patches on his neck had opened into a wet oval where the top layer of skin had come away like boiled tomato peel. Every morning there was more skin on his pillowcase, thin curls of it, pale at first, then yellowish. It stuck to the sheets and dried there. When I stripped the bed, I had to hold my breath. I kept saying infections can get nasty fast, and that medicine takes time. I said it enough that I think I was saying it to myself. Then Daniel started coughing. At first it was just a dry cough. Then it deepened. Not like a cold. It sounded wet and painful, as if he were trying not to bring something up. He would bend over, cover his mouth, breathe hard through his nose, and wave us away. One night I brought him soup and found him sitting on the edge of his bed with both hands pressed over his mouth. Blood had slipped through his fingers and run down his wrist. I dropped the bowl. He looked at me with panic so raw it made him look younger than he was. He moved his hands away slowly. His lips and teeth were red. Strings of mucus and blood hung from his lower lip. "It just came up," he said. "Mom, I didn't swallow anything. I don't know what that is." We went to the emergency room. That was the first of many visits. I remember that room better than I remember most holidays. The gray floor, the tired faces, the television no one watched. Daniel hunched in the chair between us with a towel pressed to his mouth. His skin looked wrong under the fluorescent lights. Not just pale, loose. The patch on his neck had widened, and the edges of it had turned white, like dead flesh left in water. They took blood. They did scans. They listened to his lungs. A resident asked if he had been vaping, doing drugs, inhaling chemicals, hurting himself. Daniel answered no to everything. I got angry when they kept asking. I did not. I understood why they asked. If it had been drugs, I would have thanked God for drugs. The doctor on duty told us the blood he coughed might be from burst vessels in the throat, aggravated by infection. There were some inflammatory markers. They wanted follow-up with dermatology, pulmonology, pediatrics. There were no answers that night, just referrals and fresh instructions. The smell followed us home in the car. Sophia started crying in the back seat because she said it was making her sick. Daniel stared out the window and said nothing. By then he had stopped looking like himself when he slept. His face seemed too still. His eyelids did not fully close. I would stand in his doorway at night and watch the strip of white showing beneath the lashes and feel a coldness that had nothing to do with reason. The dermatology appointment took 10 days to get, and in those 10 days, the skin on his shoulders began to come off. It happened in layers. He would scratch absent-mindedly, and a sheet of skin would lift under his nails. Not a little flake, a soft piece, almost translucent. Underneath was tender new skin, but not the right color. It was too glossy, too tight over the muscle. Some places had a faint gray cast, as if the blood under it had gone bad. I started putting old towels on everything he sat on. The couch, the car seat, his desk chair. I did laundry all day and still it never felt clean. Skin stuck in the machine filter. Tiny membranes like onion peels soaked in dishwater. Sophia asked me once in the kitchen if Daniel was dying. I told her no, so fast it sounded angry. She flinched. Then I apologized and held her while she cried into my shirt. She was 9. There was no version of this that made sense to her. The dermatologist took one look at him and stopped acting casual. He was a young man, too cheerful in the waiting room and too serious in the exam room. He touched Daniel's arm with a gloved hand, then leaned in closer. He asked permission to take photographs. He took a biopsy from Daniel's upper back, while Daniel clenched his jaw so hard I thought he might crack a tooth. The doctor said it did not resemble anything common. Could be some severe autoimmune blistering disorder. Could be a rare reaction. Could be a genetic condition triggered late. He said they needed pathology. He said that twice, like the word itself might protect us. We got pathology, then more blood work, then more specialists. Nothing fit. One doctor said it was probably an extreme presentation of a known disease. Another said parts of it did not line up with any disease she had ever seen. Another tried a steroid treatment. For 2 days, the raw areas looked less angry. On the third day, Daniel shed skin from both forearms in strips and coughed up blood into the sink until it splattered the mirror. I punched the bathroom wall so hard I fractured 2 fingers. After that, Elena began sleeping on the floor outside Daniel's room. Not every night, because sometimes I insisted she rest in our bed, but most nights. I kept a basin there, bottled water, clean towels, a flashlight for no reason, except it felt like something people had when bad things were happening. Daniel told me once, in the middle of the night, that it felt like there was pressure under his skin. Like swelling, I asked. No, he said. He was whispering because Elena and Sophia were asleep. Not swelling, like fingers, moving around. I told him that could happen when nerves were irritated. I said all kinds of strange sensations come from inflammation. He stared at the dark ceiling. I could hear his breathing. It had a faint whistle in it now. It's not a feeling, he said. It's moving. The pediatrician recommended psychiatric evaluation after Daniel started refusing to let anyone touch him. She said it carefully, and I did not blame her. By then, Daniel was saying things none of us knew how to answer. He said he could feel things pressing from the inside of his cheeks. He said his ribs felt soft. He said sometimes when he swallowed, he felt something swallow back. We saw the psychiatrist. She was kind. She spoke to him alone first, then to all of us together. She did not say he was delusional. She said chronic illness in adolescence can produce severe distress, sensory distortions, obsessional thinking. She prescribed something mild for anxiety and sleep. Daniel took it once and slept almost 12 hours. When he woke up, there was blood all over his pillow from his nose, his mouth, and both ears. We stopped that medication. His body odor changed again around the 2nd month. At first it had been rotten meat. Now it smelled older somehow, like damp dirt turned up from a grave. There was something fungal in it, something sweet and moldy. When I opened his bedroom door in the morning, the air hit me like heat from an oven. He stopped eating much. His weight fell off him, but his stomach sometimes looked distended, hard and rounded under his shirt. We took him for abdominal imaging. They found nothing useful. Gas patterns, mild irritation. Words like nonspecific and unusual came up so often I started hating them. One evening, Sophia went into his room because she had made him a drawing. She came running out screaming. I thought he was dead. I nearly fell getting up from the couch. Raoul reached the room before I did. Daniel was on the floor beside his bed, stripped to his underwear, back arched so sharply I thought he had broken something. His skin was slick with sweat, and pieces of it clung to the carpet around him. His hands were clawed at his own chest. He was making a noise I had never heard from a human throat. Not a scream, not even a cry. It sounded like he had forgotten how to use his own voice. Elena and I tried to hold him still. The moment our hands touched his arms, more skin tore loose. It slid under our palms. He thrashed and his heel struck me in the mouth hard enough to split my lip. Then Daniel went rigid. His shirtless chest jerked under the light, not up and down with breathing, side to side in small violent ripples, as if muscles deep inside him were turning over. The skin over his sternum bulged for a second. I saw it. Elena saw it too. A lump pushed outward beneath the skin, traveled 2 inches, then vanished. We both froze. Daniel gasped and collapsed flat. He vomited blood and a clear, stringy fluid that looked like raw egg white. The ambulance came. They took him in. He stayed 4 nights. That hospitalization broke whatever belief we still had that doctors knew more than we did. They ran every test they could justify. Infectious disease came in. Rheumatology came in. Pulmonology. A surgeon even examined him because one scan suggested there might be unusual tissue changes near the chest wall. But when they looked again, it was gone, or unreadable, or never really there. Different people used different words, but the meaning was the same. They did not know. They had never seen this. The body was supposed to be a set of systems. Daniel had become a series of contradictions. He had areas of dead-looking skin with no clear infection. He had bleeding from the lungs or throat without a visible cause. He had episodes of violent muscle movement not explained by seizure activity. He had elevated counts, then normal counts, then other counts too low. Another said that phrase meant almost nothing and sounded better than admitting confusion. I loved that doctor for saying it, though she had no answer either. They discharged him because hospitals cannot keep people forever without a plan. We left with wound care supplies, pain medication, follow-up appointments, and a packet of instructions thick as a magazine. At home, Daniel stopped wanting mirrors around him. He made Elena take the one off his dresser. He turned the bathroom mirror toward the wall when he could. If he passed a window at night and caught his reflection, he flinched. I asked him once what he saw. He said, "It isn't me all the way anymore." I told him not to say things like that. He said, "I'm serious." Then he asked me a question I have never stopped hearing. "If it gets out, will you still know it's hit him in his life?" The sound shocked both of us. The skin on his cheek split under my hand, not because I hit him hard, but because his skin had become that fragile. He put his fingers to the cut. I started crying immediately, apologizing, trying to touch him, and he pushed himself backward on the bed until he hit the wall. "Get out," he said. I did. I stood in the hallway listening to him cough and cry alone, and felt something inside me rot with shame. After that, he talked less. He spent hours in bed, propped against pillows, staring at nothing. His room darkened because he could not stand bright light. He said it made his eyes ache from the inside. His sclera, the whites of his eyes, had begun to look pink all the time, as if every vessel inside them had burst just a little. The skin around his eyelids peeled too. When he blinked, flakes came off onto his lashes. I was changing the dressing on his back one afternoon when I saw one of the first hard growths. At first I thought it was a scab near his shoulder blade. Then I touched it with gauze and felt something sharp under the slickness of new skin. I cleaned the area gently. A white point emerged from the flesh. It was maybe the size of a grain of rice. Hard, smooth. Bone spur, I said when Elena showed me. Maybe calcification. It wasn't in the right place for that. It was too close to the surface, pressing through skin the way a thorn comes up through fruit. Within a week there were 3 more. One along the collarbone, one near his hip, one inside the lower lip. That last one he found himself. He called me into the bathroom and opened his mouth. At the pink inner flesh near the corner of his lip, a tiny ivory point was sticking through. Not like a canker sore, not like a bitten place. It was shaped wrong, tapered, tooth-like. We went back to the hospital. Oral surgery looked at it. Dermatology looked at it. Pathology scraped it. A resident actually said under her breath, "What the hell?" I heard her. I was glad I heard her because it was the first honest thing anyone had said in days. They removed the growth from his lip and sent it for analysis. It came back composed of dentin-like material with abnormal surrounding tissue. Dentin-like. I still remember how carefully the surgeon pronounced those words, as if careful pronunciation could make them less insane. Human bodies do strange things, he said. Tumors can differentiate in bizarre ways. So it's a tumor, I said. Not necessarily, the surgeon said. I wanted to hit him too. At school, people started sending messages. At first they were kind, then curious, then mean. Teenagers smell fear and deformity the way dogs smell blood. Daniel stopped reading them. Sophia heard from a friend that older kids were saying he had some disease from eating rotten meat, or that he was growing scales, or that his family kept him locked in the house. One boy said he was turning into a bug. I went to the boy's house and pounded on the door until the father came out. I do not know what I would have done if he had answered wrong. I came home shaking with rage and sat in the garage for an hour without speaking. I should say something about our marriage, because horror does not happen in a vacuum. It happens in a kitchen with 2 people who still have to decide who is buying groceries. Elena and I did not handle it well. Sometimes we moved in sync, passing each other bandages, making calls, washing sheets, sitting beside Daniel in shifts. Other times we blamed each other for things neither of us controlled. I thought Elena let Daniel talk too much about what he felt inside, that she made it worse by listening. She thought I kept trying to bully reality back into place by denying what was happening in front of me. I still said words like infection and reaction and misdiagnosis long after those words had become paper shields. We fought in whispers at first, then not in whispers. One night he said, in the kitchen with the sink full of red-stained towels, "Maybe if you had taken him sooner." I threw a glass at the wall so hard it exploded over the table. Sophia heard. Daniel heard. We stood there among the shards, breathing hard like strangers. Elena looked at me in that moment, as if I had become someone else. I bent down and started picking up pieces with my bad hand. cutting myself and not noticing. I said, "Don't you dare." He said, I know. Then he cried so hard he had to sit on the floor. The neighbors stopped coming by. At first they had brought casseroles and offers to watch Sophia. Then they saw Daniel once, through the crack of the front door when he shuffled from the bathroom to his room with a towel over his shoulders, and the offers slowed. I do not blame them. His smell reached the hallway now, and he had changed enough physically that even I sometimes had to swallow before going into his room. His jaw looked slightly uneven, as if one side were developing too much beneath the skin. His gums bled almost constantly. His fingernails thickened and then softened at the edges, peeling in layered crescents. The skin under his arms and behind his knees stayed wet and pale, sloughing off in folds. He said the itching was unbearable. Then the itching stopped and he said that was worse. "Why is that worse?" I asked. "Because now it doesn't feel like my skin," he said. I remember one morning very clearly, because it was the last morning that felt in any way ordinary. Sophia had cereal before school. I was leaving for work, though by then I was mostly going in late and leaving early. The sun was bright on the table. For a few seconds it looked like our old kitchen. Then Daniel came in wearing one of Raoul's loose t-shirts because his own shirt stuck to his back. He moved carefully, like every step hurt. He sat down and asked for orange juice. His voice sounded almost normal. Sophia smiled at him. I poured the juice. Daniel lifted the glass halfway. Then his right eye watered suddenly. He put the glass down and pressed his palm over the eye. "What?" I said. He shook his head. Blood leaked between his fingers. I crossed the room in 2 steps. Daniel made a sound like he was trying not to scream. When he pulled his hand away, there was a pink lump protruding from the inner corner of his eye. Not from the eyelid, from the eyeball itself. A tiny nub of white was visible inside it. We got him into the car in less than a minute. He kept saying, "It feels sharp, it feels sharp, it feels sharp." At the hospital, ophthalmology took him immediately. They numbed the eye and looked under scopes and lights. The doctor called another doctor in, then another. We sat in a room while Daniel whimpered behind a curtain. The growth, they said later, appeared to be erupting through conjunctival tissue. They avoided stronger language. They always avoided stronger language. "Was it a tooth?" I asked. The ophthalmologist hesitated. She was young, but there was steel in her face from years of hiding fear from patients. "It resembles odontogenic tissue," she said. I laughed then, not because anything was funny, because sometimes the mind rejects words by making the body do something ugly. They operated to remove the visible growth and preserve the eye. For 2 days after, Daniel had a pressure bandage and pain medication strong enough to make him drift in and out. He looked peaceful that way. That scared me almost as much as the rest. While he was admitted, I searched medical journals online until dawn in waiting rooms and cafeteria corners. I read about teratomas, dermoid cysts, autoimmune blistering disorders, parasitic twins, genetic mosaicism, fungal infections, keratin disorders. I showed articles to doctors who politely explained why those things did not match, or partly matched, or could not explain the blood, the skin, the bone-like growths, the episodes of movement. There is a particular kind of madness that comes from hearing the sentence "we don't know," spoken by educated people in clean coats. Daniel came home again because again they could not keep him forever. He was weaker after that surgery, more tired. He slept through most days, but his body kept changing whether he was awake or not. One morning I found a tooth in his bed, not from his mouth. He still had all his teeth then, though several had loosened. This one was too small for a molar, too large for a baby tooth. Its root was short and twisted. There was blood on one side and a sliver of soft tissue attached. I stood there holding it in toilet paper and understood at last that whatever was happening had no floor. There was no point where I could say at least it cannot get worse. That point had passed long ago without my noticing. Elena showed it to me. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wrapped thing in her hand, and then I vomited into the sink. The murders happened after the 3rd month. I have to say that plainly because anything softer would be a lie. Until then, no matter how terrible it became, Daniel had still been our son. Sick, changed, frightened, but still himself. Even when he said strange things, even when the smell of his room turned my stomach, even when pieces of him came away in the washcloth, he still said thank you when I brought water. He still asked about Sophia's homework. He still cried when pain hit too hard. He was in there. Then there were moments when he was not. The first time I noticed it, he was sitting in bed and I was changing the bandage near his shoulder. He looked at me, really looked, with a flatness that made my mouth go dry. No recognition, no affection, not even anger, just appraisal, like a butcher judging weight. Then he blinked and whispered, "Sorry." I went away for a second. "Where?" I asked. He started crying before he answered. "Inside." I held him. He shook in my arms. He smelled of blood and rot and that wet underground stink that had become part of our house. He said, "Don't let me hurt Sophie." "You're not going to hurt anybody," I told him. He said, "You don't know that. We should have listened." There are things I replay because I think if I reorder them, some different ending will appear. The day Sophia died was wet and cold outside. I had taken time off. We were both home. Daniel had been quieter than usual, feverish, barely drinking. He had blood crusted under his nose and at the corners of his mouth. The skin on his chest had begun splitting in branching lines, where it stretched too tightly over whatever was changing underneath. Sophia wanted to show him a story she had written for school. I told her not today. She pouted. I said, "Let him rest." She hovered outside his room anyway because she missed her brother. I went downstairs to switch laundry. I was in the garage on the phone with insurance. It could not have been more than a few minutes. I heard Sophia laugh once from upstairs. Then I heard Daniel scream. Not a scream for help. A scream of panic and pain so sharp it went through me like ice. I ran up. I came in from the garage at the same time. Daniel's bedroom door was open. Sophia was on the floor. There was so much blood I slipped in it before I understood what I was seeing. Daniel had somehow gotten out of bed and onto top of her. One hand was tangled in her hair. The other was at her throat. Not choking. Inside. His fingers had torn into the side of her neck so deeply I could see white and red and something yellow. Her face was blue around the mouth. Her eyes were open but gone already. He was biting her. I know how that sounds. I know what that word brings to mind. I do not care. He was biting the soft area below her jaw, tearing and chewing with blood running down his chin. I made a sound like an animal and threw myself at him. Daniel turned with impossible speed and caught Raoul across the face. His nails, or what had become of them, opened me from temple to lip. Blood sprayed the wall. I grabbed the lamp from the bedside table and hit Daniel in the back of the head. He looked at me. I have never seen such rage in a human face. Not anger, not madness. Hunger with hatred inside it. His lips had split back from the gums. Several of his front teeth were loose and twisted, and behind them, pushing through the roof of the mouth, were new points, small and crowded, like a second mouth trying to come in. He lunged at me. I tackled him into the dresser. The mirror we had not yet removed shattered. Daniel's shoulder bent the wrong way and snapped back. He did not seem to feel it. He clawed at my eyes. I got one forearm across Daniel's throat and shouted for Elena to get Sophia. I dropped to the floor and pulled her by the ankles. I knew already there was no reason. Her blood slicked the hallway floor. I dragged her anyway because mothers do not stop being mothers just because reason has stopped. When Elena looked back, Daniel had sunk his teeth into my wrist. I was punching him in the side of the head, again and again. Pieces of skin flew with every hit. Then Daniel coughed. A heavy burst of blood came out of his mouth onto Raoul's shirt. He convulsed once, twice, and I managed to shove him off. Daniel hit the floor on his side, twitching. The skin over his ribs rolled with movement beneath it. Something pushed along his flank from inside, long and knuckled, stretching the skin until I thought it would split open. I backed away on hands and knees, my face ruined with blood. Daniel tried to rise. Then he looked at Sophia's body in the hall and made a sound I still hear in dreams. It was not the sound he made while attacking her. This was Daniel's voice, buried under blood and torn flesh, and whatever else was inside him. It was the voice of a boy seeing what his own hands had done. He said, "I'm sorry." Then he vomited a mouthful of blood and one of his own teeth. The police came. So did paramedics. So did neighbors who stood outside pretending not to stare. We told them he was sick, that he had attacked during some episode, that he needed restraints, not bullets. To their credit, no one shot him. He was barely conscious by then anyway, and bleeding heavily from somewhere inside. They took Sophia away under a white sheet that became pink around her head. They took Daniel and me in separate ambulances. Elena rode with me because there was no room for her with Daniel, and because the paramedic with Daniel looked at her in a way that said he did not expect the father to be the one left behind. At the hospital, the story became records, interviews, security, child services, police statements, psych consults, emergency surgery, grief counselors. It became fluorescent halls and stale coffee and forms asking if there were guns in the home. Sophia was pronounced dead before we even arrived. Cause of death sounded clean on paper. Exsanguination from catastrophic neck trauma. It did not sound like what it looked like on the carpet. I needed 60 stitches in the face and hand surgery for tendon damage. Daniel went to intensive care. The doctors found fresh tearing in the esophagus, damage in the lungs, new bony growths embedded around the chest wall, and severe tissue abnormalities everywhere they looked. His blood chemistry was chaos. He had infections now on top of everything else. One of the ICU doctors told me privately that his body was failing on multiple levels, and they still did not understand the mechanism. The police stationed an officer outside his room. I sat beside his bed that night anyway. People may judge me for that. I do not care about that either. He was my son, and he had killed my daughter, and both of those facts sat beside each other in the room like living things. He was sedated, ventilated for part of the night, then breathing on his own again by morning. Tubes came out of him. Fluids went in. Machines clicked and sighed. His face was swollen. The skin around his mouth had cracked at the corners deep enough to show raw meat beneath. His eyelids twitched even under sedation. At one point he woke enough to track me with his eyes. I stood up. He could not speak around the damage in his throat and the dryness of everything, but he mouthed something. I leaned in. Kill me. I told the nurse he was delirious. He was not delirious. The next days passed in a blur of funeral planning and hospital visits. I buried my daughter while my son lay under guard a few miles away. I shook hands with relatives whose words I barely heard. I watched Sophia's small coffin lowered and thought there ought to be some law of physics preventing Earth from falling on a child. There was not. I did not cry at the funeral. I looked like a man who had already died and been told to keep moving. Afterward, I said I never wanted to see Daniel again. That lasted 3 days. Then I asked Elena if Daniel had eaten. That is the shape of love when it cannot survive itself. It keeps breathing after it should not. Child Protective Services talked about removing Daniel from the home once he was stable. The police talked about charges, incompetency, and juvenile psychiatric placement. The doctors talked about long-term care as if the long-term existed. It did not. 3 nights after Sophia's funeral, Daniel killed 2 nurses. I was not there for the first part, but I heard enough, saw enough after, and read enough in the reports. He had been restrained lightly because he was weak and heavily sedated. One nurse went in to adjust a line. Another followed when she heard shouting. Something in him rallied. That is how the ICU attending put it, as if he had summoned strength. He tore free of one wrist restraint by ripping skin and meat off his own hand. Then he drove the metal IV pole through the first nurse's throat when she leaned close. The second nurse tried to run. He caught her by the scrub top and pulled her backward hard enough to drop her. Security footage showed him on top of her in the doorway before the camera angle lost detail. When staff reached the room, her face had been torn open from mouth to ear. One eye was crushed in the socket. Her carotid had been bitten through. Daniel was found crouched between the bed and the wall, choking on his own blood and theirs. The officer outside the room had gone to help a crashing patient 2 doors down less than a minute before. People called him a monster after that. On the news, not by name because he was a minor, but still. The local stations got wind of a violent hospital attack connected to a disturbed teenager with a rare medical condition. They used phrases like shocking and horrifying and unexplained. They showed the outside of the hospital in the rain while talking heads speculated about psychosis, drugs, system failures. No one said what I knew in my bones by then. It was not just psychosis. It was not just illness. Something had entered the body of my son, or grown there, or awakened there. Pick whatever word feels scientific enough to let you sleep. I do not care what word you use. I saw his skin move with hands that were not his. I heard him beg us not to let it out. Whatever happened in him, it was not only chemical. After the nurses died, The hospital transferred him under emergency authorization to a secured medical unit 2 counties away. I was allowed to see him once because I remained legal guardian and because he was technically still a patient. Elena refused to come. The room there was colder. No family photographs, no ordinary hospital softness, just steel rails, reinforced glass, and a smell of disinfectant too strong to hide the deeper rot coming off his body. He was restrained more heavily. Ankles, wrists, waist. Sedation dulled him but had not erased him. His face had changed further in less than 2 days. His cheeks had sunk, making the jaw seem too wide. Several teeth were missing from the front of his mouth, but behind the gaps I could see new ones growing in crooked rows, some tiny and needle-fine. The skin on his forehead was stretched glossy. His ears bled slowly from fissures behind them. Both eyes were swollen. He turned his head when I entered. For a second I thought he did not know me. Then tears gathered in the corners of his eyes. "Dad," he said. His voice was wet and frayed. I went to him despite the guard. I stood close enough to smell the necrotic sweetness of his skin. His hand was mostly wrapped because of what he had done to free himself, and blood had dried in the grooves around his nails. "I should hate you," I said. He nodded weakly. "I know. Why did you hurt them?" "I don't know all the time," he said. Then he swallowed and corrected himself. "That was not true. I know. I just can't stop it when it wants out." "What is it?" He shut his eyes. Tears slid into his hair. "I think it's making room." "For what?" He opened his eyes and looked at me with such exhausted terror that I nearly fell. "For its face." I wanted to leave. I wanted to run down the corridor and never hear another word from him. Instead, I sat in the chair beside the bed and took careful breaths until I could speak again. "Then tell me what it feels like." He whispered for a long time. I do not know if any of it would mean anything to another person. It meant too much to me. He said there were places in his body that did not belong to him anymore, spaces that felt occupied. He said when he slept, he dreamt of being packed inside himself with something else, shoulder to shoulder in the dark. He said sometimes it moved first, and he only followed. He said the pressure behind his eyes had become the worst part, because it felt like chewing. "Chewing," I repeated. He nodded. Inside the eyes, the guard asked if I wanted a doctor. I said no. Daniel then said the thing that finished whatever was left of me. He said, "When I killed Sophie, I could still hear myself screaming." There is no answer to a sentence like that. I sat there while he cried, and a string of blood ran slowly from his nose into the corner of his mouth. When visiting hours ended, I kissed his forehead. The skin there was fever hot and too smooth, like scar tissue. He whispered, "Please don't let Mom see me again." I asked why. He said, "Because I'm not done changing." The call came the next morning. He had destabilized overnight. Severe bleeding, respiratory distress, rapid tissue swelling around the face and throat. They wanted family there now. Elena came with me this time. We drove in silence. I stared out the passenger window and tried to remember Sophia's laugh, because already grief was doing what grief does, taking the living edges off memory while leaving the hurt sharp. At the facility, staff moved differently than before. Fast, tight faces, Nobody made eye contact for long. A doctor met us outside the room. She looked like she had not slept and was done pretending there was language for this. "He's still alive," she said. "But there have been developments." "What developments?" I asked. She hesitated. Then she opened the door. I had thought I was prepared. I was not. Daniel was strapped to the bed because even dying, he kept jerking against it. His chest rose in shallow, ragged pulls. Blood bubbled at one corner of his mouth with each breath. Most of the skin on his neck and upper chest had split and peeled away, exposing wet red tissue streaked with yellow. The smell in the room was almost unlivable. But that was not what stopped us. His eyes were open. Both of them had ruptured outward. Not exploded. Not empty. Something had pushed through. From each eye, through torn sclera and swollen flesh, protruded clusters of small white teeth. They were growing from the eyes themselves, crowded in warped gums that had formed across the ruined surface. Some were little pointed things, some flatter, all slick with blood and vitreous fluid. His eyelids could not close around them. Each time his face twitched, the teeth clicked softly against one another. Elena made a choking sound and staggered back into the wall. I stood very still because if I moved, I thought I would come apart at the joints. Daniel turned his head toward us by sound, not sight. There could not have been sight left. Blood ran from the corners of both eyes into his hair. "Dad," he said. The teeth in his eyes shifted as the muscles moved underneath. I went to the bed. No one stopped me. His hand searched weakly against the restraint until I took it. The bandages were soaked through. "Does it hurt?" I asked. It was a stupid question, but it came out anyway. "Not anymore," he said. That was the first peaceful thing he had said in months. Elena stayed near the door, one hand over her mouth, sobbing without sound. The doctor said they could sedate him more deeply. She said they were trying to keep him comfortable. She said systems were shutting down. She said words people always say when death is entering the room in plain view. Daniel's breathing grew rougher. Every inhale caught. Every exhale rattled. Blood spread under the tape at his throat. The skin of his abdomen moved oddly now and then, a crawling ripple under the sheet. I did not look too hard. He squeezed my hand once. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know," I said. I wasn't saying it for killing Sophia, or not only for that. I was saying I knew he was still in there somewhere, even then, in that wreckage. I knew he had been trapped in his own body and made to watch it happen. That knowledge did not forgive him. It did not lessen anything. But it existed. He said one more thing, so quietly that I almost missed it. "It's looking." Then his body arched. All the monitors changed at once. Nurses came in. Someone told us to step back. As they moved around him, his mouth fell open, and I saw that the second set of teeth on the roof of his mouth had grown larger. One of them cracked through the soft palate with a wet pop. Blood flooded the back of his throat. He convulsed. The growths in the eyes seemed to clench as the muscles seized around them. Then his chest dropped and did not rise all the way again. They worked on him for a while because that is what medicine does, even after hope has turned stupid. At some point the doctor looked at the monitor, then at us, and stopped. Daniel died before noon. My son died after months of rotting alive and turning into a shape no body should know how to make. They cleaned him before letting us see him again. That was almost worse. His wounds were covered where possible. Gauze had been placed over the eyes. His jaw was wrapped closed. The room smelled cleaner. But the outline beneath the sheet still belonged to the same impossible ending. Elena would not go near the bed. I did. I put my hand over the blanket on his chest and felt nothing moving underneath. For the first time in months, nothing was pushing, chewing, growing, forcing itself outward. Stillness had finally taken him back. After his death, there were investigations, of course. Autopsy, internal review, police reports. Everything got colder and more official. We were advised not to speak to media. We did not. The death certificates and incident reports used language that stripped the flesh from events until they sounded almost manageable. Daniel's autopsy findings were held for a long time, then partially released to us, then amended, then explained badly. There were extensive tissue abnormalities across multiple organ systems. There were calcified and dentin-forming structures in impossible locations. There was catastrophic infection secondary to breakdown of skin and mucosal barriers. There was hemorrhage. There were masses of undifferentiated tissue with no clean classification. No one wrote that there had been teeth in his eyes, not in those words. They wrote ectopic odontogenic structures involving orbital tissues. I read that line over and over until the words stopped meaning anything. Sophia and Daniel were buried 3 weeks apart. People say children should not be buried before their parents. People say many things because saying them lets them believe order exists. I buried both of mine in the same season. Elena and I did not survive it as a couple, though technically we stayed married for another year. I drank. Elena stopped sleeping. The house remained full of reminders no matter what I boxed up. There were stains in the upstairs carpet that never fully left. There were gouges in Daniel's bedroom wall from the bed frame striking it during his convulsions. There was one of Sophia's pencils under the radiator. There was a sour ghost smell in the hallway whenever rain came. I began hearing Daniel cough at night. Not every night. Just enough that I would sit up in bed before reason caught up. Once I found myself outside his old room with my hand on the knob before I understood I had walked there asleep or nearly asleep. I stopped telling Elena things like that, because she looked at me with too much fear. The worst part was the dreams. In the dreams, Daniel was lying in bed, still changing, and he would ask me to help peel something away from his face. I would start at the forehead, where the skin was already loose. It would come off in my hands like wet paper. Underneath there would be another face packed close to his, cheek against cheek, trying to turn outward. Sometimes it had no features. Sometimes it had too many teeth. Once it had Sophia's eyes. I woke from that dream vomiting into the sink. I started writing things down because I was afraid memory would either distort everything or mercifully erase too much. That is part of why this exists. The other part is uglier. I need someone to know it happened. Not the news version. Not the pathology version. The house version. The father version. There is one more thing. 6 months after Daniel died, I was cleaning out the last box from his room. Mostly school papers, a cracked phone case, soccer photos from when he was 11, and all knees and missing teeth and joy. At the bottom of the box was a spiral notebook I did not recognize. Most of it was empty. Then, halfway through, there were pages in his handwriting. The dates were from early in the illness, before the hospitalizations became constant. He had written down sensations because one doctor told him to track symptoms: itches under ribs, pressure behind left eye, coughed blood again, skin came off neck in shower. Then later the notes changed. Feels like something biting when I blink. Woke up because something moved in my arm. Can hear wet clicking in my head when it's quiet. At the end, on one page written so hard the pen tore through, there was this: I think it started before the skin. I think it started when I found that tooth in the backyard. I had no idea what he meant. The memory came back hours later, months before the smell, before the peeling, before any of it. Daniel had come in from mowing and shown me a little white object he found half buried near the fence. I barely glanced at it. I thought it was from a dog, maybe from the trash the raccoons dragged through the yard sometimes. He said it looked human. I told him not to be gross and throw it out. I do not know if he did. I went into the backyard with a flashlight that same night after reading the notebook. I knew it was irrational. I went anyway. The grass near the fence had grown over by then. The ground was damp. I pushed aside weeds with the light shaking in my hand. There was nothing there at first. Then I saw a patch of disturbed earth by the base of the fence post, where the soil looked slightly sunken. I got the shovel from the shed. I dug less than a foot before the smell hit. Not fresh rot. Old rot. Buried rot. I should have stopped. I did not. What I uncovered was not a body exactly, not whole enough for that word. More like a collapsed bundle of dark cloth and greasy bone fragments tangled in roots. Animal scavengers or time had done their work. I saw part of a jaw. Human, I think. I saw teeth still set in it. I called the police then. I am not completely insane. They dug the rest. The remains were old. Very old, they said later. Decades at least. No easy identification. Probably someone buried there long before our subdivision existed, back when the land had been broken up and sold in pieces. The detective who spoke to me tried to sound practical. Old rural properties sometimes had ugly histories, family crimes, unreported deaths, nothing supernatural. He did not say that word, but it sat between us anyway because my face must have asked it. I did not tell him about Daniel's notebook line. I did not tell him about the pressure under the skin or the teeth in the eyes. I knew what his expression would become if I did. After the remains were removed, I started noticing things I could not explain cleanly. The sour smell in the hall got stronger for a few days, then faded. The bathroom sink upstairs clogged with fine white slivers that looked like nail clippings until I touched one and felt enamel hardness. One morning I woke with blood on my pillow from my gums. I told myself it was stress. Another morning the inside of my cheek felt sore, and for 1 sick second I imagined a hard point pushing through. There was nothing there. Maybe there was nothing there because I was looking for it. Maybe grief can colonize the body. Maybe trauma teaches you to inspect every sensation for the start of an old nightmare. Raoul left for good in the winter. There was no dramatic scene. He packed a bag and said he could not live in that house anymore. He said every room sounded occupied. He moved in with his brother. We spoke on the phone about bills and paperwork and nothing else. I stayed. People asked why. because I did not know where else to put the dead. The months after were flat and gray. I went to therapy. I said the words out loud to a woman with kind eyes and a notebook. My son killed my daughter. My son died. My son grew teeth in his eyes. Saying them did not make them more real. It only made me hear how impossible they sounded in a calm room. She asked if I had thoughts of harming myself. At first I said no. Then one evening I stood at the stove boiling pasta for no reason except the habit of dinner still existed, and I realized I was thinking of the garage beam. Not with panic, with relief. After that I said yes when she asked. I wish I could tell this as a story of recovery. I cannot. The truth is that after enough horror, the body continues out of stupidity more than courage. You wake up, you shower, you answer one email, you throw out expired yogurt. Meanwhile, part of you is kneeling forever in a hallway slick with your child's blood. The final thing that happened was small. That is what finished me. I was changing the sheets on my own bed. A simple chore. I lifted a pillow and heard something hard fall to the floor. It was a tooth. Small. White. Twisted root. Not mine. I know my own mouth. I stood there holding it between my fingers and felt every room of the house open inside me at once. Maybe it had been trapped in the seam from months before. Maybe it had come from one of Daniel's things, moved from laundry to basket, to closet to our room by accident. There are reasonable explanations. Reasonable explanations came too late. I sat on the edge of the bed with that tooth in my palm until dark. I thought of Daniel asking if I would still know him if it got out. I thought of Sophia's hair in my hand as I dragged her into the hall. I thought of my own face split open, of the nurse's ruined throat, of my son blinded by teeth that should never have existed. And I thought, with a calm that scared me more than panic ever had, that I was done being a witness. I do not know whether what happened to Daniel began in the yard, or in some hidden flaw of flesh, or in a place no scan can show. I do not know whether there was truly something else inside him, or whether the human body, under rare and vicious pressures, can become stranger than any ghost story. I do not know whether the dead in the soil matter. I only know sequence. Boy finds tooth. Boy starts changing. Family keeps taking him to doctors. Nothing stops it. He kills. He rots. Teeth bloom in his eyes. He dies. His father follows. If you are reading this, then by the time you do, I have already made my choice. I have set the papers in order. I have written to Elena, though I doubt the letter says anything useful. There are photographs of Sophia and Daniel as children in the box by the front closet. Use the one from the beach for Sophia's marker if Elena wants it. Use the school portrait for Daniel. He looks most like himself there. I am tired of this house and what it keeps. I am tired of opening doors and bracing before the smell reaches me. I am tired of sleep. Most of all, I am tired of loving what destroyed me. I can hear coughing upstairs again as I finish writing this. Maybe it is the plumbing. Maybe it is memory finding a voice. I am not going to check. I have checked enough. I loved my son. I loved my daughter. I was not able to save either of them. That is the whole truth. When I am gone, burn the mattress from his room. Tear out the carpet. Dig deeper by the fence if you have the stomach for it. If you find more teeth, Do not bring them inside. Do not keep anything that smells sweet and rotten. And if your child ever tells you something is moving under his skin, do not tell him it is nerves. Believe him.